all. I'm very happy to introduce our speaker for this session, Dr. Ebin Deniraj. Okay, so just a few words about him. Dr. Ebin Deniraj received his PhD degree in Information Technology from VIT University, Vellore, India. He has also worked with Alcatel-Lucent, former Bell Labs, for a year. He is currently the head of the Department of Computer Science Engineering, Indian Institute of Information Technology, Kottayam, India. He is a distinguished speaker of ACM in the domain of data science. He is a recipient of Microsoft AI for Earth grant in the year 2019. He also received the Best Thesis Award by the Computer Society of India. He is right now working with various interdisciplinary international projects such as Airfora, which is an initiative of 11 countries, including funded by Volkswagen Foundation, Germany. He has also received funding from industries such as Orsico USA and Technology Innovation Hub TIH of IIT Palakkad. He has published more than 25 research articles so far in various national, international journals and conferences. He has delivered technical talks at several national and international conferences, and he has a patent under the domain of precision farming. He is a Senate member of IIIT Kottayam and is also the faculty in charge of academic affairs of the institute. He is a governing body member of Atal Incubation Center of IIIT Kottayam. He is one of the jury members of the prestigious Aegis Graham Bell Award in the data science category. He is in the reviewer board of prestigious journals such as IEEE Transactions on Industrial Informatics, Cluster Computing, Computer Communications, Knowledge-Based Systems, Neurocomputing, IEEE Transactions on Computational Social Systems, International Journal of Remote Sensing, etc. His primary research interests include social big data analytics, machine learning, and responsible AI. We are very happy to have you today, sir, and I extend a hearty welcome on behalf of the entire fraternity of Cochin University of Science and Technology to handle this session. Please, sir.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Judy. So thank you for the warm welcome. And it's really a pleasure to be part of this 5-day online workshop on big data concepts, tools, and techniques. So let me just share the screen.
Okay.
Just give me a second. I hope the slides are visible.
It's
yeah, thank you. So before I begin with the topic NoSQL, let me just give a brief intro about the institute where I belong to. As already mentioned by Dr. Judy, I'm from Indian Institute of Information Technology, Kottayam. So it's the reason why I specifically say about it is like, even though it is in Kerala, not many people know about this institute. So I'll just take 1 or 2 minutes just to give a brief intro about the institute, and then I'll move to the talk. So it's a campus which was, it's a relatively new institute which was formed in the year 2015. But then within a short span of time, we have achieved so many different milestones that we are one of the topmost at IIITs in a PPP mode, right? So it's a fully residential campus, and right now we have different programs which consist of UG, PG, and PhD. And UG programs comprises of BTech in Computer Science and Engineering, and also BTech in Computer Science and Engineering with a specialization in cybersecurity, then BTech in Electronics and Communication. And PG courses, specifically, we have a very flagship program for industry working professionals. We have an MTech for in AI and data science, and also an MTech in cybersecurity. So all our programs are in IT or IT allied areas. And also we have, within a short span, we have MOUs with many premier institutes, including the TUM Germany. And also we have PhD candidates from the industry. So basically, we are trying our level best to kind of provide an interface between academia and industry. So a small snippet about of our campus. And in addition to that, we have a very vibrant data science research group here, which consists of around 15 faculty working in various areas, as you can see in the slide. Right? So that's a very brief and small intro about the institute, and moving to what exactly I'm planning to do for the next 1 hour 15 minutes is that I'll try to provide you a very a bird's eye view about NoSQL, and also basically I'll try to give a slight motivation regarding why this was required, or why NoSQL was kind of very much kind of useful. And also towards the end, I'll mention few things about what are the possible research directions in NoSQL. So NoSQL is a term which maybe we started hearing in the last 10 years or so. So this was if you think about the market size of NoSQL, maybe in 2018 it was maybe a $3,000 million market, but it is expected that by 2026 or so, you may have a market which is projected to reach around $23,000 million. So you can imagine how much growth is happening. So the annual growth is expected, or is kind of predicted, as almost close to 30% in the NoSQL. Like if you consider the companies which are using it, and also many innovative business offerings, which means that like it could be initiated by this open source database technologies such as NoSQL, because the moment people started, or industry started adopting, there is a specific reason why it is being used very widely by the big IT giants, right? Or right from the big IT giants to even a small startup, right? So the reason is that there are certain constraints associated with the business attractiveness of, say, let's say the technology such as RD, relational database, and we'll try to see how exactly it is differing from this kind of RDBMS, and also we'll try to compare and contrast like when we can use or when this is going to work best. And there are various factors which had led to the kind of growth of this NoSQL. Certain aspect could be its adoption in online social networks, and also with respect to gaming technologies. Because web applications right now, they kind of drive the NoSQL market due to the high usage in session management or user profile recording. In all these cases, NoSQL is being used. So they're used in different industry verticals. So we'll try to see maybe 1 or 2 use cases as well in the session. And to talk about the different verticals, you have NoSQL being used in retail, used in online game development, and different variety of different fields it is being used. So including healthcare, education, etc. So among all verticals, IT applications account for a larger share of this NoSQL market trends. Right? And the detailed agenda which we'll go through will be of this sort. We'll initially try to take a look at the historical perspective of how data and databases have evolved over the year. Then we'll talk about the significance of the SCAP theorem. Then we'll talk about NoSQL, what exactly is it? And towards the end, we'll talk about certain research aspects of this NoSQL databases. So we all know that there is a rise in demand for web applications as well as e-commerce applications. So these are the main 2 driving factors which are has actually kind of created this trend, or this kind of a technology shift called NoSQL. So ultimately, before we move on to see what exactly is NoSQL, it's always good to take a look at history, like how it has evolved, right? So if you think about the usual way of storing data, it has started right from like punching cards to you had the magnetic tape. So it has evolved a lot, right? From maybe in the last 60, 70 years, if you consider, it has been evolving, and even now also it is evolving. So it all started with this hierarchical database. So during this specific era, that is in the early 1960s to late 70s, whenever you talk about database, you are talking about technology where you store data as records, which were kind of linked to one another. So the architects of these hierarchical databases, they kind of envisioned walking through these records like these tree-like structures, so that any record could be accessed by a key or a system scan or through navigating the tree links. So that was the basic idea of a hierarchical data set or database. So later in the 1980s, it reached to this revolutionary thing which we are seeing and which we have seen a lot, which is known by the name relational databases. So where you are talking about things like entity relationship, where it has been polished so much in the last 20-30 years, and that is the basic method which is used by any any industry where you want to store data, where you have all the structured data is there. So basically, this has happened over a few years, and during this era, that is during this era of around 10 to 20 years, this technology was developed, and still it is a very efficient method for storing, managing, and retrieving data from tables. And in the late 2000 or around 2008 to 10, in that period, you had this wonderful technology being brought. So it was known as the NoSQL movement. So the objective of this era, that is 2000 to 2010, it was actually to create scalable technologies that kind of stored, managed, and queried non-tabular data. So if you observe these different kinds of history, like right from hierarchical to what we have today, there is a proven observable time lag between the early adopters and the wide adoption of new technologies. So if you think about 1980s to say 2000, the ER databases with relational databases during 1970s, there was again a 10-year lag between the first paper and the corresponding viable implementation of this relational technology. So you can find the same time lag for any of these other areas. So maybe some company may take initiative, but to get it widely accepted, it is going to take some years. So that's how technology works. Right? So ultimately, we have come to a point that is in today, we are thinking about something called a graph thinking, which is actually has come out of this NoSQL databases. So later we'll see about how exactly we can divide the types of NoSQL databases. There is a category called the graph databases. So from that, we have a kind of thinking or thought process, which is known by the name graph thinking. So which means that being able to see graphs across your data, it is same as recognizing the complex network within your domain. So whatever domain you are taking, this graph thinking aspect, it says that it is very easy to solve problems if you have that graph thinking in your thought process. Because right now, if you think about the amount of data which we are being bombarded, data is no longer just a byproduct of doing business. So data is increasingly becoming a strategic asset in our economy. So that is the reason why there is an increased demand for data-based technologies. So when I'm saying data-based technology, it can mean either things in data science and things in AI. You talk about big data. So that's the reason why you have a lot of things happening in using these keywords. So if you think about companies' assets, there are a lot of companies which are just thriving just with data, even without even if they don't have a physical office. With data, they may create assets worth billions and billions of dollars. Right? So you can think about Google, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook. All these have data as in common. Right? So if you think about these companies, they are the most valued companies, and each of them, they owns the data that kind of models its own large complex problems. Right? So maybe most of these companies, they have this graph thinking methodology. Right? So although this relational databases have been a perfect data storage for decades together, even now also it is being used. So when you think about NoSQL, it actually means it is not only SQL. We're not going against SQL, but we're kind of adding something to the SQL so that you get more insights out of the data, whatever you are dealing with. Because many NoSQL databases have kind of emerged for the storage and processing of large volumes of structured, semi-structured, and even unstructured data. So the other details we'll see in a while. So ultimately, the problem with conventional database warehousing technologies or database technology is that whenever you have semi-structured or whenever you have unstructured data, it kinds of become difficult to deal with such kind of data. So with respect to this graph thinking, I'd like to kind of just give you some more idea. So what is the idea, or what is the advantage of this graph thinking approach? So one of the primary advantages is that whenever you convert a complex problem in terms of graph, it becomes a lot more easier to solve such kind of problems. So obviously the question is, does your problem need graph data? So there are many ways of thinking about data. So the first question in the decision tree challenge is to understand the shape of data that your application requires. For example, if you think about a social network such as LinkedIn, so you may have a lot of mutual connections, you have connections. So each of those can be considered as a node and an edge connecting it. So in different ways, you can kind of have this graph thinking process, right? So another question you may ask is, the problem which I'm going to deal with, do relationships within your data help you understand your problem? Right? So that could be the other question which you may be asking for any problem. So, and the other thing is, are there any significance with respect to the relationship in your data? So basically, what do you need the result for? So in these aspects, there is a lot of different end goals. For different end goals, you can use this graph thinking process, which will help you in easier reporting, in easier research, and in easier retrieval. So the reason of this graph thinking approach, it has come as a byproduct of this NoSQL database, because you had this NoSQL graph database, and from that only this kind of thought process has been kind of escalated to a different level. Right? So till now we have been talking about a historical perspective of database, and also I just mentioned a few things about graph thinking. So obviously, what kind of data are we dealing with? So what are the types of data? As I mentioned, you are talking about structured data. So typically, you are thinking about quantitative data, which means that data which is kind of highly organized and kind of easily decipherable by maybe ML algorithms. Right? So that is in the big data era, that's what you call as a structured data. So it can include name, date, address, credit card numbers, and basically their benefits are kind of tied to the two things. One is you can the ease of use and the ease of access to this kind of data. So you have that data flexibility where it is very easy to deal with such. So such kind of data, you usually call it as structured data. So the advantage of structured data is that it's very easy to kind of play around with this kind of data. You can easily implement your whatever ML algorithms you want. It can be easily used by business users without much effort. And also, it is accessible by more tools. Whenever you have structured data, you have a lot of different tools available, because since structured data predates unstructured data, there are more tools available for using and analyzing structured data. So the problem with structured data is that one is you have limited usage, because data with a predefined structure can only be used for some intended purpose, which limits its flexibility and usability. And the other thing is that you may have limited storage options. You would have heard about terms like data warehousing or data warehouses, where structured data is generally stored in like data storage systems with kind of rigid schemes. Like you have certain schemas being defined and you'll be using this. So therefore, changes in data requirements, obviously it will necessitate an update of this all structured data, and which leads to like a lot of expense and it is going to take a lot of time and resources basically. So you would have heard about things like MySQL or OLAP or SQLite or SQL and PostgreSQL. Right? Different kinds of tools are available. So the other part of the coin is actually unstructured data, and usually they are typically called as category or categorized as qualitative data, where it cannot be processed and analyzed via conventional data tools and methods. So since unstructured data does not have a predefined data model or a schema like structured data, it is best managed using this non-relational or NoSQL databases. So there are other ways to manage unstructured data, such as data lakes, where it preserves it in raw form. That aspect is also there, but usually or preferably companies go for this NoSQL databases. So when it comes to unstructured data, we know that it is being rapidly increasing. The moment we wake up to the time we sleep, we are being kind of bombarded with a lot of data, and you are generating data and also you are consuming data. Right? So there are a lot of statistics related to that. I'm not going into that. So ultimately, one thing is sure is that like unstructured data is over 80% of all enterprise data, and 95% of any businesses, any startup or any big giant you take, they prioritize unstructured data management, because structured thing, it is kind of easily manageable, but when it comes to unstructured, it is a little difficult. So examples of unstructured data, it can include say any sort of say mobile activity data or social media post or IoT sensor data. Then you will have different kinds of this kind of data, and the benefits evolve basically with respect to the format, the speed and storage, while the liabilities are that there should be enough expertise and you need certain other frameworks basically to deal with this kind of unstructured data. So usually unstructured data in its native format, it remains undefined until it is needed. So its adaptability kind of increase with respect to file formats in databases, and basically it widens the data pool, and obviously it enables data scientists to prepare and analyze only the data they need. So one thing we can say is it has a kind of fast accumulation rate, because there is no need to predefine the data, and which means that you can easily and very quickly you can collect the data. So but the disadvantage is that you need certain expertise to deal with this kind of NoSQL databases, and also there are specialized tools which can deal with that. And the use cases, if you talk about unstructured data, there are a lot of use cases. You think about predictive data analytics, you think about chatbots, you think about any data mining application, like where imagine that you want to understand the purchasing pattern or the product sentiment from a e-commerce website. So in all these cases, the data is basically unstructured, and so obviously the number of use cases is kind of endless, right? And in general, you can classify data also into dynamic and static data. So just from the word, you will understand that the data which doesn't change frequently can be called as static data, but dynamic data is something which you can expect a change like every now and then. So the examples include, like, you think about any financial related database, or any specific scenario where you have a lot of streaming data being kind of ingested. You can think that as dynamic data. So obviously there is a need to kind of classify this data. So the reason is, we know that a relational DB or RDBMS is the predominant data management infrastructure in most of the organization today. Even though NoSQL is there, still predominantly it is being used in all, like a combination of our RDBMS and NoSQL. That is the usual trend in all companies. So because there is a flexibility in data access, and as I mentioned, there are a lot of other extra things, like you can easily integrate it with any of the application, the existing databases. And you have something called ACID properties, which you would have seen in a relational database, like atomicity, consistency, isolation, then durability, right? And also it is very easy to query a data from a normal RDBMS, RDBMS database, right? But one of the drawbacks of relational model is that a kind of mismatch is there between the way the underlying data is stored and the in-memory data structures that are commonly used while accessing the data. So initially this kind of issue was not a problem earlier. So, but later, when there was more and more data, and when you had the concept of big data in the early 2010 and all, so at that time, when you have large volume and variety of data is getting generated through various means, like machines, sensors, or any other automated devices, most of the time this data is very noisy, and obviously it may not have specific structure, and it might be undergoing dynamic changes. So in these aspects, relational database systems are either too costly to handle any this kind of data, or they may not be simply not able to scale to handle this much volume or this much quantity of data. So organizations, they are looking for alternate ways to manage this new class of data. Usually you know that is known as big data, right? So that's a reason why this NoSQL databases is primarily required. So when it comes to scaling, so in a traditional database, imagine that you have deployed an application, and assume that it has gone viral, or it has become so popular that your traffic and data is starting to grow, and your database is getting kind of overloaded every day. So maybe people are telling you to kind of scale your database by some means, right? So usually if you're using a traditional RDBMS, you can do that in different ways, right? So either you can do a vertical scaling, which means that right now whatever hardware you have, you just upgrade it with a faster CPU, or with more memories, or with a larger hard disk, right? But there is a limitation to this vertical scaling, is that it is limited by the amount of CPU, or the number of, or the whatever RAM you have, and also whatever hard disk you have, and it can be conferred only on a single machine. Or else you can add more machines like to that, right? So which means that you are going for something like a distributed database, right? So obviously when you're going for a distributed database, you would have heard about something called as sharding. So we'll in detail we'll see what is that sharding means. And basically you can think that as whenever you have a distributed database, you may have multiple replica of the same data being stored. So that's the reason why you call that as a distributed database. So but that is also limited by the read to write ratio, and also the communication overhead. So imagine that you have it being spread in geographically in different locations, then obviously the communication overhead might be a little on a higher side, right? So obviously that can affect the performance of retrieving the data or reading the data, right? So there is a concept called sharding of data. So sharding is a method for distributing data across multiple machines. So imagine that you would have heard about different NoSQL DBs or NoSQL databases. So basically, this if you think about MongoDB, so MongoDB is widely used even in our Aadhaar storage, right, or data storage. So it also uses sharding to support deployments with very large data sets and high throughput operations. So database systems with large data sets or high throughput applications can challenge the capacity of a single server. So what the sharding or partitioning, what it does is that it is breaking up large data set into smaller subsets. So, but there is a difference between partitioning and sharding. So sharding implies that the data is spread across multiple computers, while if you are thinking about partitioning, the traditional term of partitioning, in that you can't say that the partition or the data is spread across multiple computers. Most of the time, partitioning means that you are grouping a subset of data within a single database instance. But on the contrary, sharding is actually a method of splitting and storing a single logical data set in multiple databases. So by distributing the data among multiple machines, a cluster of database systems can store a larger data set and it can handle additional requests. So in short, I can say that sharding allows a database cluster to kind of scale along with its what do you say, data and traffic growth. And there is another term for this sharding. It is usually known as horizontal partitioning. So I'm not going to confuse you with different terms. So in short, I can say that sharding adds additional programming and operational complexity to your application, but still you'll be able to kind of deal with these operational challenges of scaling your database. So just like that, before you start with consuming data, there is no need of going for sharding. But imagine that you begin some initiative and you have a lot of data coming into your database, and then if you want to scale at that time, maybe you can think about sharding. So whether we should go for sharding or whether we should defer the sharding, that those things can be kind of decided. So in short, what we have seen till now is we have seen a very brief history of data. And oops, so let me just, yeah. So it's been quite some time you are staring at the screen. So we'll take a quick 1 minute break and then we'll come back. Okay, all right. So what we have seen till now is we have seen different types of data and also what is the need of this scaling of databases, right? And also we have mentioned about sharding. So it is nothing but we are dividing some part of your data set and you are going to distribute it across different computers or different servers, right? So ultimately we are doing a kind of replicating the data. So why we should replicate this data? So if you are thinking about the traditional client server model, maybe replication may not have that much of significance, but in a distributed database, replication obviously it avoids any single point of failure, and also it actually increase the availability of your particular data, because you, even if one node fails, still you have a backup thing. So usually it is said that you replicate a chunk of data in at least 3 different locations. And there are a lot of rules behind that, but I'm not going into that. So ultimately, when you have these different kinds of data being stored, you are faced with another challenge, and that challenge is known as the consistency challenge. So where you have different things being same thing being stored in different locations, you have the liability of updating it at the same time, or else your data may become inconsistent. So you have other protocols such as two-phase commit protocol and all to ensure this atomicity and consistency, right? So but in a way, whenever you think about this kind of a distributed database, without a theorem called the CAP theorem, you cannot move further. Right? So this CAP theorem is a very interesting theorem, which actually tells that like it allows the designer, the database designers, and it makes them aware of the trade-offs while designing a network shared data system. So this CAP theorem has influenced the design of many distributed data systems. And it is very important to understand that the CAP theorem, as it makes the basics of choosing any NoSQL database based on the requirements. So you have dozens or hundreds of different NoSQL database available in the market. Out of that, how do you decide which one to go for? So a basic preliminary level, you need to know what exactly is this CAP theorem. So ultimately, it is as you can see in this particular Venn diagram, you're trying to maintain a consistent balance between the strictness of consistency and the availability or scalability of your data. So a good enough consistency, it depends on what kind of application you are dealing with. As I shown in the last slide, if it is a financial related or a banking related thing, definitely consistency has a bigger role. But if you are thinking about any other thing, like you are thinking about any sort of streaming applications or in these things, even if slight delay is there, it is still okay. It is manageable thing, right? So the limitations of distributed databases can be described using this three properties, what you see in this Venn diagram. So usually when you say consistency, it means that every node or every partition location in your database should be able to see the same data at any given instance. That is what is known as strict consistency. You shouldn't have the in two different locations, the same data is stored in different things. That is not what we want. And the second thing is basically the availability, where if you think about, say, the system is continuously operating, and even if one of the node crash or some hardware or software part is down due to some issue, still it should be available. And the third aspect is known as partition tolerance. So where the system continues to operate in the presence of these network partitions. Even if you want to create more partition, you don't want to kind of bring down the system or bring down the database. Even in a live database, you'll be able to do those partitions. So this consistency, availability, and partition tolerance, this is shortly referred as this CAP, C-A-P. So one can achieve a maximum of 2 or 3 properties in any network shared database system. So at least if you have 2, then easily you can go with that particular distributed data set. So usually you can see different companies are advertising with different kinds of marketing strategy. Some people may be focusing on consistency. Some databases might be focusing on availability, saying that the system will provide a guaranteed response to all your client requests. And typically the availability is measured in terms of system uptime, saying that we have 99.999% availability, right? Or if you think about the partition tolerance, in case of any sort of failure, the system is likely to get partitioned and a few nodes will be able to reach the other nodes. And if the data is kind of replicated across different partitions, then one has to either compromise availability or one has to compromise consistency. So if you think about traditional databases, because in traditional databases also you had this distributed things, right, or distributed databases. So traditional relational databases, they largely focused on this C and A, or consistency and availability. At that time, they didn't bother much about this P, or partition tolerance. But however, with the increasing focus on using this distributed commodity servers, you are going for cloud or any sort of utility computing, uh, for either for any sort of app development or for some meeting platforms, including whatever we are having right now, either it is a Zoom or uh, Google Meet. In all these cases, you have some scaling happening at the background. So basically this elastically scalable data, or you have a lot of compute requirement that keeps changing, right? So one cannot avoid network partition in such scenarios. So therefore, a compromise has to be made between the availability and consistency aspect to meet today's data management needs. So there is another aspect where some companies might be focusing only on the consistency part and the partition tolerant thing, or you can call that as CP, right? So you can think about MongoDB, HBase, Redis, these kind of NoSQL databases, they focus on this aspect. So a CP database, usually it delivers consistency and partition tolerance at the expense of availability. So which means that when a partition occurs between any two nodes, the system has to shut down the non-consistent node. That is, it simply make it unavailable until the partition is resolved. So that is the aspect with respect to CP. And there is another aspect called AP, where you're talking about only availability and partition tolerance. Right? So when an AP database delivers availability and partition tolerance at the expense of consistency. So when a partition occurs, all nodes remain available, but those at the wrong end of a partition might return an older version of data than the others. So when this partition is kind of resolved, this kind of AP databases typically resync the nodes to repair all the inconsistencies in the system. So that's how they manage it. Or else if you think about CA, where you are focusing only on consistency and availability, most of the traditional database you can think about, they focus on this aspect. Because so ultimately when you're designing a database, you can think about these aspects before you jump into concluding like which particular database I want to use, right? So for some time we have been talking about NoSQL, but we haven't seen what exactly is this NoSQL. So this is a kind of next generation databases, and it is actually kind of helping to kind of meet or kind of enable best of both worlds. So what are those best of both worlds? I'll say in a while. So this kind of NoSQL movement, it started maybe in the early 2009 and all, and even now it is growing rapidly. So the characteristics of this kind of NoSQL database is that it has this schema-free, easy replication support, and you have very simple APIs using which you can connect it. And it is, as I mentioned earlier also, it is able to scale without much difficulty. So basically you can think this as open source distributed non-relational database. And you would have heard about different NoSQL database, at least here and there. You would have heard about Google Bigtable. You would have heard about Apache HBase. You would have heard about Facebook Cassandra. Then you have Amazon Dynamo. Then you have LinkedIn Voldemort. So these are the different kind of NoSQL database, right? So these systems, as I mentioned, these are addressing some of the limitations of relational databases. So as I mentioned, they are schemaless, they are partition tolerant, allowing elastic scalability. They are open source with active community support. And more about this, it is highly cost effective due to the use of commodity servers. And the trade-off between consistency or availability to achieve scalability, like all these things can be kind of looked into different kind of NoSQL database, and you can decide which particular database should I go for, right? So you can think this NoSQL database as non-relational DBMS. It started with Google, and the very first paper, theoretical paper, it was published way back in 2003, and even now it is continuously evolving. So a lot of products and a lot of initiatives came from companies such as Facebook, Netflix, Yahoo, IBM, and many more in this NoSQL domain. Right? So always when you think about NoSQL, because of this large big data, it has been kind of evolving, because over a few terabytes, earlier for maybe DBMS was finding it difficult to deal with. And it was at that point they realized that there is something more we need to do, because efficient storing and accessing this large amount of data is difficult, and even more we need to consider all these fault tolerance, backup, everything, right? So ultimately, if you have a framework which can do all these aspects, then that is kind of very, very useful. So based on that only, this NoSQL was kind of introduced. So right now you have 4 different types of NoSQL databases. It is one is the column store or column family. The other one is key value. Then you have the GraphDB, which I mentioned few things in the introductory part. Then you have this document databases. So one by one, we'll take a look at each of these aspects and just try to get an overview about what it is about. Right? So whenever you want to choose a NoSQL database, you may have to first think about the CAP theorem. Then based on your requirement, you need to choose what kind of NoSQL database you want to go ahead based on your problem and also based on your requirement. Right? So a key value store database is one of the simplest and also the most popular and scalable of NoSQL databases. It simply uses a concept of key and a value. For example, a key can be something like a user identifier, right? And value can be some credential such as password, right? You have one column as user, the other one as password. So keys in this key value store, they are like primary keys in a relational database. So which means that they must be unique. So the value in a key, the value in a key value store is treated as a black box and untyped. That is, the system simply treat that as a simple byte. It will not think that in any other way. So the application that accesses the value has to decode this black box object and use it in the appropriate way. For example, as I mentioned, a key can be something like customer ID. You separate that with a comma with so many different attributes such as name, age, gender, address. It can be any of these things, right? So one of the main drawback of this data store is that the query predicates on value cannot be resolved at the database level. For example, if you have a query, like in a traditional database, if you have a query to retrieve all users whose age is greater than 50, it cannot be answered easily with a key value store. If one is interested in answering such a query, like retrieve all users whose age is above 50, right? So in that case, it is going to be expensive, and a complete scan of key value store is required to retrieve all records and subsequently filter relevant records at the application level. So the keys are distributed, or in other words, sharded across a network of servers using a master slave or a peer-to-peer architecture, basically for supporting scalable data access workloads. So which means that both a read workload as well as a write workload. So these systems, they support a kind of configurable consistency and availability levels. So which means that one can set the write to succeed if and only if 2 replicas succeed in writing the data. So in total, if you have 3, out of that, if 2 has been successfully written, then only it is going to kind of set the write as succeeded. So and also from the description, what you can see in the slide, key value stores are useful in situations where the data is accessed always by a key. And some of the common applications include, say, storage of session data or storage of shopping cart details, user profile, or the preference what a user has, or some session cache information. All this can be stored using this key value store database. And there is also another aspect known as column family or CF store database. So it's actually a hybrid of the normal RDBMS and your key value stores. So where values are stored in groups of 0 or more columns, but in column order. Like you can have either the row order or the column order, but here it is going to be column order. So this values are queried by matching keys. So that's what I said. It is a combination of RDBMS, the normal relational data, and your column value store. So this column family data stores were initially very much popularized by Google's NoSQL database known as Google's Bigtable. So the basic idea is to group this related set of attributes into column families and maintain group of column families as values. So each value is mapped to a unique row key. So the value in the column store is technically, you can refer that as a multi-dimensional map, right? So I've shown one example. You can see here, like the top one. So each row in the column store is identified by unique key, and the value comprises of families of columns, and each family has a set of attributes. So the attributes within a column family are maintained in sorted order, right? Now, the column name and value in a column family data model, they do not use any data types. And as I mentioned, they are treated as bytes. And hence, any arbitrary string can be used as part of column name and value. So you don't have any sort of constraints in there. So each cell in the column family, it can store and contain multiple values in that timestamp order, as in the example. So in table 2, the row key is actually the user ID. The value captured is a set of column families of user, say it can be personal and all the demographic information. And under each of the column family, one can maintain a set of columns with corresponding values. So the column family NoSQL database, it can support creation of several hundred column families. So each column family can hold several thousand or even millions of columns or attributes. And also, we need to note that column family follows a sparse data model. That is, if a column is not available for a particular row, then that column value is not stored, just like a sparse matrix, right? So, so this is in contrast to the relation model, where each and every column needs to be populated with null values, right? So saying that you don't have a suitable value over there. Okay? So we have seen about two different things. One is the initial one, a key value store database. Then right now we are talking about column family store database. And there is a third category known by the name document database. So because usually that's a reason why, even as I mentioned, MongoDB, it's being used in other data collection as well, right? So this document stores, like just like the name implies, it stores data in document form. It can be either in XML or it can be in JSON, JavaScript object notation. And each document here also is identified by a key. So the value part contains the actual document described in semi-structured or hierarchical tree form. So one can find the similarities of this model with the earlier key value store model and the column family or CF store. So the key distinction is in the expressiveness of value field. In the key value or KV store, the value is actually a black box, right? As I mentioned. In the column family, it allows some inferencing on the value part, but the value has to follow a certain data structure, right? As I've shown in the previous example. But in the document database, on the other hand, it does not impose any constraint on the value part. It can be a list, it can be a map, it can be a scalar value, it can be any arbitrary data structure. And like that is a significance of this particular document database. So imagine that, for example, our database has two documents relating to the person. Say, like you have a name like Rajesh Khanna, right? And the other relating person named, say, Ajit Krishna, right? As you can see, the data structure cannot directly store in a relational database for two reasons. One is that in a relational context, the address information has to be stored in a separate table to ensure these normalized relations. So, but when it comes to, say, this kind of a document database, whenever you have this kind of a query, let's assume, get me a list of customers from the city of Bangalore. So in a normal traditional database, unless and until you have these indexes which are properly maintained, then you cannot kind of do or deal with such kind of query. But the data model in the case of a document database is actually designed around the end user query access pattern. So if the access pattern change, then it requires significant change in the data model. So therefore, the database designer need to clearly understand the query requirements well in advance. So this is considered as a limitation of NoSQL database system, and it is more relevant in a document database. So we have seen about 3 different types of NoSQL database. One is we started with key value store, then we started with column family. The third one is known as document database. And fourth and the final one is actually known as graph database. So here it allows to store complex relationship between entities. So a graph, as you know, it consists of nodes and edges, and the node that are related will be connected via edges, and one can specify properties for a node. It can be username, it can be age, and there could be some edges which will show the relation between these two nodes, right? And for example, you can think about a graph as like anything like a social network, right? So ultimately, graph database can store complex network relationship, and it is often difficult to distribute or shard network data across nodes for building scalable applications. So at this context, graph databases are used in situations where data sizes are relatively small, but the relationship between nodes are fairly complex. The primary example is, you take a look at any social networking platform, online social networking platform, they will be using graph databases, right? So it's been quite some time you have been staring at the screen, so we'll quickly take a look at, move your eyes away from the screen, and then we'll come back. All right, so we have seen about different kinds of or types of NoSQL databases, and yeah, so we'll just take a look at the different key concepts in NoSQL database systems, which are kind of general for any NoSQL database, irrespective of whether it is a key store, or whether it is a column family, or whether it is a document database, or it is a graph database. So in all these things, there are certain characteristics. yeah, there are certain characteristics which can be generalized across all these different NoSQL database systems. The very first thing is known as nested entity. So it's a concept where the related data are always stored together. Uh, so if you can unmute, it will be great. I can get some noise. Yeah, yeah, thank you. So for example, for example, you think about any online shopping website. So you have different orders happening, and usually an order generally contains information about order date, customer details, the details of shipping address, billing address, all these things. So in a relational environment, the order data is stored in multiple tables. You may have tables like orders, customers, address, items, etc. But in a NoSQL environment, the data is stored in nested or in aggregate form. So how exactly this is being done is you maintain just one customer nested entity and store all the orders placed by the customer along with it. So alternatively, one can use two nested entities, one for customer, that is, it may store customer ID, order date, details, shipping details, billing address, all these things. And the other one, it may store the shipping address in multiple nested entities. So the primary benefit of these nested entities is that it allows ease of distribution of data. So for example, the orders, the orders, if you can be distributed or sharded, and also based on the order identifier and stored in multiple distributed locations. Right? So as the entire order information is available in one place and can be accessible via a single key, that is either it can be order ID. So ultimately, it can readily answer all queries related to that order without the need for joins, because in SQL or in normal SQL tables or SQL databases, you have this join happening, inner join, outer join, different kinds of join. So that is usually a time consuming, and also it is a complicated process. So that can be completely avoided when it comes to NoSQL. The other one is basically something which is related to this nested entity. It is the atomicity aspect. So as I already mentioned about nested entity, related data is grouped and always stored together. So for instance, as I mentioned, the order and its related product and shipping information are stored as a single continuous group. So any updates to the order, say order status or order date or any of this kind of update can be made without compromising on consistency of the data. So, but imagine that if somebody wants to change the shipping address just after somebody made the order, right? So a shipping address change requires change in not just the order entity, but also in the related customer entity. Right? So in a NoSQL database, the atomicity is generally guaranteed at the individual nested entity level. So therefore, proper nesting of entities plays a crucial role in ensuring atomicity of transactions in a NoSQL environment. So it is often a trade-off that a database designer has to make while you model the data. And another aspect is with respect to denormalization, because we all know what is normalization. It is one of the key concepts used in relational databases to minimize the duplication of data. So this is achieved by storing data in multiple tables, and you have different different normalization happening, right? So it aims to minimize or eliminate anomalies in data when you do insert, update, or delete operations in a database. So the cost of normalizing a database is the additional cost involved in combining data from multiple tables using complex joins. But when it comes to NoSQL database, denormalization is a concept that is specific to NoSQL databases, where the related data is grouped and stored together. The use of nested entity concept actually leads to this denormalization. The fourth aspect is ordered keys. So we already discussed about that previously. In all the four different types of NoSQL databases, you have these keys. So the keys are used basically for sharding or distributing the data across multiple commodity servers, right? And the next one is actually secondary index. So secondary index is, for example, if you consider a column family or a document data store database, the data is organized based on keys. For example, a column store containing user details organizes data by user ID. So the value portion of the data contains the personal information, maybe his demographic details. And if one is querying the data by user ID, it is easy to retrieve all information about the user. However, if one has to get information about all users whose gender is, let's say, female, then it requires complete scan of the database. So in order to avoid complete database scan, a secondary index is created on most frequently accessed columns. So in the example which I mentioned, maybe if you create a new index such as gender index, then easily you will be able to answer all the queries related to such a query, like getting all the details regarding users who are female. Right? So every time a new insert or update is made, the secondary index also need to be updated. And the last most important one is actually multidimensional rows or composite column keys. So the use of multidimensional and composite keys in the context of, let's assume, column family stores, we already mentioned it earlier. So the primary idea is to support efficient retrieval of data based on row or column key. So it allows a kind of an efficient roll up or a drill down of data by users. Right, so imagine that you want to do something kind of partition based on city and state. Right, you can define multi-dimensional row, a multi-dimensional key on user column family as like state, column, city, colon, user ID. So in that way you can do. But if you are thinking about SQL and you want to do a roll up or drill down, it is slightly difficult as it involves many complex queries. But here you can maybe do that in one line of code. Right? So a slight comparison or compare and contrast related to what we have seen with respect to RDBMS. So how do you kind of categorize or distinguish this NoSQL? So I think already I mentioned once, NoSQL doesn't mean that you are against SQL. It just means that not only SQL, that like other than the relational thing, we can think that it is a non-relational database model. So in a sense, we can say that using NoSQL database, it allows for more than one storage mechanism to be used based on the user's need. So the most important result of this NoSQL movement is that something called polyglot persistence. So polyglot persistence is a term that is usually refers to multiple data storage technologies being used together. So an enterprise with an application, multiple application or singular components of an application needing to store data differently. So that is the basic idea behind this polyglot persistence. So it has this word has its origin from the term polyglot programming. Polyglot programming, it came around the year 2005 or 2006, and it basically expresses the idea that computer applications should be written in a mix of different programming languages. So based on that, you have this concept in databases as well also, which means that an application can communicate with different databases using each for what it is best to achieve an end goal, and hence you use the term polyglot persistence. So NoSQL does not have a prescriptive definition, but we can make a common set of observation. It is not only using the relational model, it is mostly open source. It is built for 21st century websites, right? And it is schema-less, and it actually scales very well. That is the main point behind this NoSQL. Because RDBMS, it is poor in handling large volume of data. So that I have already mentioned. So maybe at least some of you may have a question in mind. When you're building applications, you may need DBMS, but whenever you need to scale, you go for NoSQL databases, right? So that may not be entirely true all the time, because DBMS, we can't say that the era of DBMS is going to be over because of this NoSQL. They are going to coexist together. That is a guaranteed thing. Because if you think about websites or applications such as, say, YouTube or WhatsApp, right? So for storing this information, they may not be directly using NoSQL databases. For that, they are still using the normal traditional DBMS one. But maybe for the analytics aspect, all these companies heavily use this NoSQL aspect. So they are using both these things together. So that's why I said, like, you are actually kind of making use of best of both worlds, both in RDBMS as well as NoSQL. So ultimately, it has given a scenario, or it has created a scenario where you can go for this multi-model database solutions. So because in addition to the normal RDBMS requirement, organizations need databases to support multiple data models. You may have documents, you may have column oriented, you may have full text, you may have graph, you may have video, you may have different kinds of data. So this big data movement, it kind of drove rapid evolution and platform proliferation in 3 technological areas, as in organizations adopted specialized processing solutions for each data model. So in a recent Gartner report as well, I think not the recent one, 2020 report, they actually talk about this multimodal DBMS. It is one that supports a unified database for different types of data, it could be relational, document, key value, column family, etc. So right now you have different kinds of NoSQL databases. You have MongoDB, you have HBase, you have Cassandra, basically for storing and querying of semi-structured as well as unstructured data in a variety of models. And at the same time, you have search databases as well. So where it will be storing full text querying of semi-structured, unstructured data. You think about search database such as Splunk or Elasticsearch, etc. And at the same time, you have the third thing, that is processing engines. So NoSQL database, search database, and processing engines such as Hadoop or Spark or any of these large-scale storing and distributed processing file systems. All these three technology, they are going to kind of completely change the whole scenario, because a combination of these things can really work out magic in different use cases. So ultimately, we are thinking about a complete multimodal databases that should support any and all types of data. So which will support storage, processing, and access. And data should be stored in a single unified database with support for relational, full text search, and more importantly, ML queries. So most of the so-called multimodal database in today's market, it would not truly qualify as much for this kind of a requirement. So the reason is today's multimodal databases supportively, or they support very similar models and query types. So for example, SQL and NoSQL query support, but no text search or ML. But some companies might be focusing on only text search and ML. They may not have SQL or NoSQL query support. So you don't have all these things bundled into one thing. There are only very few companies which are actually working on that aspect as well. So in general, these are the different NoSQL database categories. So I've just given some limited names only, and certain things they are actually kind of overlapping with each other. For example, if you think about ArengoDB, that is used in key value database as well as document database, right? So it's been used in both. So there is definitely some overlap is also happening, right? So quickly we'll move. So how do you choose a NoSQL database out of this list? So one thing is, we need to understand there is no single rule. There is no perfect NoSQL database. So when you have a large uncontrolled unstructured data, you are trying to fit into RDBMS. Imagine that you then, like, you may be facing some problem. So you want to look at what exactly you want to do and what exactly you want to achieve. Based on your requirement, you will choose what kind of NoSQL database you can go for. But remember that just like the normal RDBMS database, here also you need to create backups and recovery. Here also you may have to plan for like capacity planning. Here also you may have to monitor the performance. You may have to tune and optimize things, right? And also whenever you have things going out of place, or things when your nodes are out of sync, or you have some sort of data issues happening, then obviously just like in a normal traditional RDBMS, here also you require a database administrator and also a system administrator, just like the usual thing. So the point which I'm trying to say is NoSQL is not a kind of magic thing which can do anything and get itself accustomed to any of the challenges on by its own. It's not like that. This is something which requires equal amount of investment as well as equal amount of time and resources to be given when compared to the normal traditional relational database as well, right? So, but the road ahead for NoSQL database, it's very good. So it is predicted in different surveys that half or at least majority of the new business system will incorporate something called continuous intelligence. So continuous intelligence basically requires transforming big data to real-time analytics. So so that like all these businesses, they can use to prescribe actions. So many companies, they still struggle to find a general purpose database solution that responds quickly, handle vast amount of data and all types of data, and scale out multiple computing instances. It performs well. So this kind of an ideal thing is still missing. So still a lot of research scope is there. And NoSQL technology, it actually also help in moving the data quicker across multiple machines than the traditional one. And for example, in 2017, NoSQL database technologies evolved, and also they retaining flexibility, speed, and performance while embedding these ACID properties. So especially with respect to the document database, they have achieved that. So which means that each document contains keys and values customized to user specifications. And MongoDB especially added this ACID properties to their document data architecture. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, the continuous intelligence database architecture, basically to understand how to get continuous intelligence from the document database. So it's still a challenging thing, because usually in a traditional database, people get stuck while trying to map their database model to a document database, because they try to achieve normalization, organizing data, and it's always a schema-based relationship. So obviously, customers may have a terrible experience, because starting business benefit by right from that paradigm shift, they may have to think about data storage. They have to think about how to access when modeling this data. So ultimately, there are certain modernization toolkits available for doing this also. So for those who wish to keep their relation schema, that is the traditional one, and into that, if you want to add this NoSQL, companies such as Confluence, they integrate NoSQL and SQL technologies using some enterprise interface tools. And obviously that will create powerful platforms for allowing even business analysts to kind of easily access real-time event, and also for further analysis. You can also think about examples like Tableau or Power BI, where real-time interactive dashboards and reports can be queried with SQL. So it's a combination of NoSQL and SQL, right? And and the other aspect is basically how do you govern these data clusters whenever you have this real-time data. So MongoDB has a lot of that kind of dashboards available. And the other aspect is making the future of NoSQL technology lies with this, or it looks very bright with respect to continuous intelligence. And NoSQL database promised to be more user-friendly through this autonomous database functions. And just take the case of MongoDB, where it will detect user behavior and provide suggestion on database modeling and index creation. It will automatically kind of give suggestions for achieving that. So one thing is sure, any business you take, they are going to require NoSQL technology to leverage this continuous intelligence because of its flexibility, performance, and obviously the reliability. And furthermore, based on the recent pandemic, definitely businesses, they started embracing multi-cloud possibilities as a more resilient and elastic way to store data and prevent downtime. So NoSQL databases scale out with performance across many clouds, and ultimately it is going to achieve this continuous intelligence using all these continuous data which is being captured. And ultimately it is not just RDBMS, it is a combination of RDBMS and NoSQL can actually create this continuous intelligence. So these are the certain research directions. So initially, even though NoSQL was thought to be applied only for, say, web applications, and the initial development was mostly on that. But nowadays, there are a lot of aspects with respect to the security, with respect to the consistency, and also increasing the speed of access. For example, especially with multimodal databases such as combination of Cassandra with Titan, or there is something called the Foundation DB from Facebook, or also there's a lot of attempt being made to draw the attention of the present day research community to focus on the up-to-date real-time data handling issues, like as in NoSQL. Right? So in a nutshell, I can conclude that you cannot use NoSQL for each and everything. You need to identify what exactly is your problem and what is the solution that you're expecting. Based on that, if you are moving to NoSQL, that can really help you in creating wonders. And also you need to clearly identify it's not a rebellion against relational database management systems. A combination of both can create real magic. And also, as I mentioned, it has made the scaling to a completely new and different level. So I hope I was able to give a kind of bird's eye view regarding NoSQL, and also how do you choose a NoSQL database. That itself is can be delivered as a different talk. That's why I haven't gone much into that aspect. So that's all from my side. So if you have any specific queries, I'll be really happy to answer that.
Thank you, sir, for your informative section. Now it's time to ask questions. Participants, you can ask questions.
Okay, there is a question by Veena. Whether the sharding of data is managed by the database itself, whether the user should have a concern on this. So see, basically the advantage of this sharding is that you don't need to worry about this. All these fault tolerance and all these things will be managed by this NoSQL framework, whichever one you are using. We don't have to bother. So you can think that in different in this way. Imagine that you are creating a Hadoop framework. You have around 10 different nodes being added into it, and initially after configuring, even if something goes wrong, still you will not know that one node is down. So in the same way, even sharding will work. That is one aspect. And which type of NoSQL database is suitable for financial chatbots? So that it all depends on like what kind of problem you're going to face, or are you dealing with only textual data, or are you also dealing with even some images and the other aspect as well. So it all depends on what kind of problem you are dealing with. So that's what I said. There is no single NoSQL database which can cater to all the different problems. So it all depends on what kind of data you are trying to ingest, and also what kind of problem you are going to face or you are trying to solve. So in these two aspects, you will be able to decide.
Okay, thank you, sir. I hope all questions are clear. Now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Judy Emmy to deliver the vote of thanks.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, okay. Sir, so on behalf of formal vote of thanks anyway, so on behalf of the Department of Computer Applications and the participants, I extend a hearty gratitude to you, sir, for taking such a wonderful session. Actually, it was very good because the next session that is coming up is demonstration on NoSQL databases. So it's a combination of streaming data plus some NoSQL connected to it. So Kafka and other things are going to be also discussed now. So, and you have given an right from the beginning, like an introduction of how NoSQL is, what is the importance, and then why we should go into NoSQL. And you've made a comparison of it, and finally you've ended up with a research perspective. What are the research gaps that are there in NoSQL? It was such a wonderful session, and hope the participants also found it very useful. Anyway, thank you so much for the session, sir, and thank you for accepting our invitation and spending time with us also. Thank you
No
so much.
problem. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much.